Okay. Sorry about that. Running a little bit behind here. The work session for the Annapolis City Council on Thursday, May 25th, 2023 will be called to order at 2:04. At this time, would everyone willing and able please stand for Pledge of Allegiance? Mr. City Attorney, please present the item.
Yes, sir. The first item on the agenda is ID 482. We can't hear it up here.
Okay, we might just hold for a second here. I can't hear the echo too bad, but yeah.
If only this was happening, it would happen after I was having too much fun when I was a kid.
All those loud concerts.
Can you try now, Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor, can you
Yep.
try to say something to see if it's echo?
Hello? Still echoing? 1, 2, 3.
Yes, it's still echo.
Yes, we can hear.
It's like feedback.
Just gonna get some technical assistance up here.
Try again.
Yep, still going. 1, 2, 3.
No, you can still hear that.
Budget. Still echoing back there? No, still echoing? Yep, thank you.
Just need a second, sir.
If everyone just turn their microphones off all around the room for a second. Anyone got a microphone on besides me? Nope.
Maybe it's just yours, and the others try it.
Yep, let's try that.
Test.
Am I
Is it
echoing?
working?
Can you hear me?
Test.
1, 2, 1, 2. Can you hear me? 1, 2, 1, 2. Still echo? Okay, I'm going to change microphones.
So the attorney's microphone also has
1,
that
2, 1,
as well.
2. Is that echoing?
Well, I'm going to speak for 5 seconds, then I'm out. Right?
Can you guys hear an echo on this one?
Mr. Mayor, they're on the way.
Out of the room.
Yep. Mr. Mayor, the first item, discussion, ID 4823, submitted budget amendments created by the Finance Department from the ideas and recommendations submitted by the City Council members.
And I'm going to go directly to the person with a good microphone. Director Dickinson wants to say a few words before we start.
Yes, hello. So last night you received from us a memo that I authored and a list of the proposed amendments. And thank you, everybody, for reviewing that for us. As you know, we start this process early. In December, asking for everybody's ideas for priorities for the budget, so hopefully we can incorporate those into the budget. And we appreciate all the input that you've given us on the additions that you'd like to include in the budget. In front of you, in the packet that you have on your desk, is what we have so far for amendments, drafted, the sheets for each individual amendment, and the list the schedule again. There was a couple of edits to that list that we did this morning. Nothing major. One of the capital projects has been changed as far as sources. We moved it from capital reserve to bonds, and we edited some of the descriptions. I would also like to point out that based on what we sent out last night, Alderwoman Pendel Charles reminded us of another one she had in the queue, and she was waiting for information from us to provide an amount, which we lost in all the shuffle. So we're going to add one to this list regarding Annapolis United funding, and we'll let her describe that when she's talking about hers, but it's not on the list yet.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and then I just wanted to reiterate the message that I had in the memo about we have these reserves. If you look at the amount of the one-time reserve without adding on a 23 layer, because 23 is not finished yet, and that amount was based on an estimate. There's only 1.7 million that's not yet committed, and the requests that are on this list exceed that by a substantial amount. So I just urge caution with depleting that, and am concerned that we may want to save some of that for other efforts coming up in this year, and also that these types of reserve serve as a fallback in case something else comes up during the year that we need funding for, and not have to go to contingencies in our baseline 15% general fund reserve if we had some kind of emergency. So that's one point I wanted to reiterate, and that's all I wanted to say right now, and you can ask any questions.
Alderman
but-
Savage, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the introduction. I guess my one question on that would be, is there a percent that you would recommend? I mean, do you think we might need an additional policy as far as making sure we maintain, I don't know, would it be 20%, 15% of the one-time use funds?
We can visit that possibility. I mean, right now, we require the 15% as a baseline reserve. If we need to keep more in our fund balance reserve and not touch it, that's something we can review, but I don't know that we'd have the time to look into it right now.
What's the 15% you mentioned?
Our fund balance policy, after we finish a fiscal year, if we have excess above what we need we look at next year's revenues, we take a percentage, and we need to keep 15% of that in a fund balance reserve. Then on top of that, if we have excess, we put 50% in budget stabilization. If that's full, we put the rest of it in the one-time reserve. And the other 50% of the excess goes into the capital reserve fund. So it's funneling to other reserves. So what we're doing when we do something like this is one of the reserves is getting drawn way down, so that if something else happened or we needed it for some other purpose, there's not much to draw from. So, and like I said, the 1.7 million, I know everybody's looking at that $4 million number that is in my projections, but that includes a projection for 23, which we don't know what that's going to be yet. It could be less, it could be more. But until we finish the fiscal year and have a really good idea of where the expenses are and whether the auditors find something we missed, make an adjustment that could somewhat draw down my estimate. So I don't want to try to allocate some of that layer unless we know it's there.
Thank you. I would respectfully ask if we can try to keep our time to about 2 minutes, because we have 49 to go through, I think, 48 to go through. I would just say personally, I'm going to try to, I support all of your amendments. I think they're all great. You all know what your wards need. The mayor's budget is for everybody's ward, so you can see that spread throughout the city. But my thought is trying to keep us below a couple of 100,000 seems reasonable. There's no real science to that, but I think I'm supportive of what we're saying here. These funds, we should be prudent with them, right? They are needed, and we need them for backup, and I think Jody's done an amazing job to get the city in the place where it is, so I ask us to be cautious. So we will move on with the agenda. And Jody, would you like to go present them one by one? I think we can.
So what I will do is we'll move down the list in the amendment order, and when there's a group of them, I will just ask the alderperson to speak to their group that's on the list, instead of going one by one. The first three are Mayor Buckley's suggestions, so Mayor, I'll ask you to.
So amendment 1 is I'm asking the council to consider increasing the budgets by 15,000. So one is for the Annapolis Arts District. We know of several of their events that have been successful, positively impact the city, not only for the businesses, but for the residents alike. They do a lot with a little bit of money. When you compare it to other cities on how they fund their arts district, it is a very low number. So I would ask we consider that, and then I would also ask for the Main Street program to consider them as well for another 15,000 increase. They chase other money with the money we give them. They definitely make more money for us in grants than they are given. So my view is a good investment with those guys. So on the second amendment, I think we all agree, a parliamentarian, somebody that we can all go to get a definitive answer in our meetings. Someone that we all choose would be a good thing for the city to sort of maintain order in our meetings. So that would be a consultant or somebody that we bring into our meetings, someone that we all select, that we're all comfortable with, that we can go to on that. Amendment number 3 is a lobbyist, the same lobbyist we used to pull down about $7 million in the last budget. That group, even though we write the grants here, we make sure that they're put in on time, but somebody actually has to shepherd those grants on a federal level. Someone has to be in Senator Cardin's ear or Van Hollen's, Sarbanes. We pulled down a 3-point-something grant from the Department of Commerce, which is an economic development grant, and that is for City Dock. We also pulled down a FEMA grant for about 3-point-something for City Dock as well. And then the third one came from a different source, a $300,000 grant from HUD. All those grants add up to nearly $7 million. I think that's a good return on investment. This is a one-time thing. A lot of the federal dollars, the earmarks and such things might not be there in the following year. So I think it's worth using the same firm again to sort of get some applications in while we can. There's a Department of Transportation one we think we're very eligible for. And these are not just for City Dock. The Department of Transportation one is looking for things in Hawkins Cove, in College Creek, on our trail connections. So I believe a good investment. So that's my pitch for those 3 amendments. Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly look favorably on these 3, but I want to ask a generic question now because I think it'll come up throughout. ARPA money is a finite source, and the one-time only will vary depending upon how we do. So some of these things, I think, are things that I'm more than willing to fund this year out of these essentially one-time only funds, but all three of yours, I view as something we need to be thinking about for future budgets as something that we will build in to spending. So I support these,
So,
but
yeah.
with that thought.
So that kind of gives me an opportunity to what I was going to say before we start with the Finance Committee amendments. So if you look at the schedule here, based on the way the amendment was explained to us and our thoughts about whether it's now a continuing initiative, we have put it in one of those two columns, the one-time reserve and recurring costs. And that recurring cost is anticipating that this is something that will continue from year to year to year. And so there are no available revenue sources that are extra, so we're going to, for those, we would plug in the ARPA monies, which means in the following year, when the ARPA funds are depleted, the council would have to either come up with another revenue source to replace that, or cut expenses there or other places. So I just want to highlight that that recurring cost column is going to use more of the ARPA funds, thus expediting a potential structural deficit, which is something we've anticipated for a couple of years, but haven't had to go there because of the excess revenue that we've managed to retain. And then there was
I'll
a
let you finish,
question?
and then I'll go to Alderman Pindell-Charles.
Okay, and so that's what I wanted to say about that, and I was going to introduce the Finance Committee amendments and have the chairwoman go through those, but I'd also want to point out that we put an extra sheet on your desk. There it is. It's a table that looks like this. When the Finance Committee gathered their proposed amendments together, we, in the Finance Office, decided to try to come up with where we would fund those amendments from. And when you read the amendment, it shows you what we're taking it from, but it appears, there's a few numbers assigned to each one, and this table kind of shows you where that source is. The idea was, for most of them, on the new positions that we added in the mayor's proposed budget, taking an additional 2 months of turnover savings for those positions, anticipating that any new position has to be advertised. You have to pick your candidates, interview, hire, and bring them on board. 2 months of turnover isn't an egregious amount to remove from the funding for this year. So this table helps show you how we pulled those amounts into the amendments, just for your information. Okay, so I think, I don't know if we want to take the question or move on to the amendments.
Alderman Pindell-Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That somewhat answered my question, but taking it a bit further, when we're talking about the reoccurring expenses in years after fiscal year '24, is there some way that you can give us a, for lack of a better word, ballpark as to what the parameters may be, say, for fiscal year '25 before we start looking at the budget after that? That way we'll kind of know where the allowability is.
So what we did on the recurring cost column was we added up all of the proposed amendments from the council, and those recurring costs, 477,600.
Gotcha.
Okay, and so below that, we have the balances that remain in ARPA after '24 was over. We have already allocated all but $968,000 of ARPA funding, and that we had planned on pushing into FY '25. If we pass these amendments with the recurring costs, that number will go down, so that FY '25 would have a lower amount of ARPA to apply, to use.
Okay, so, okay, that answers my question. I'm just trying to, I guess, get a good handle on how close we're coming once, number one, we finish with the ARPA funds and even going beyond the use of the ARPA funds that we have available.
That in FY '25, when we do this process next year, you will likely be facing a revenue decision, or as we go into the union negotiations and planning in the fall, we'll have to make sure we're keeping our planned FY '25 expenses in check.
Okay.
So we're going to have to be looking for any possible additional revenues and looking to keep expenses in control, because once the ARPA funds are pulled out, if we don't have some other surprise beneficial revenue influx, then we're going to, there's going to be a revenue decision the council would have to decide. For instance, on a tax increase of some kind,
Right.
or doing something else to generate more revenue.
And just on a smaller level, I guess every department, and this is not necessarily a suggestion, just I'm throwing it out there, should probably have somebody in there who's has a good ability to write grants. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to cover it all, but that may be helpful in the long run, to just kind of look at every grant out there that we could possibly apply for, and every department that relies heavily on grants, or even not, they can find maybe something out there that would help in that vein. So that's just kind of a tidbit to throw out there. Not that it will make a huge difference, but it will make some. Thank you.
Thank you. And could I get the city manager to just explain a little bit about why we might need some money for the new pension idea? So moving people from the pensions, which is a long-term liability, potentially shortening that liability is what you're proposing, right?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Michael Malinoff, City Manager. Part of the class compensation study is also looking at the defined contribution, possibility of a defined contribution retirement plan, which is portable. Jody and Tricia, who I don't see here, have had some preliminary discussions with the state retirement system, and there's some stipulations on us providing a similar benefit, whatever that means, to anyone who goes into the defined contribution plan. So the idea was to set aside a certain amount of money for that. Jody?
Yes, so we're in the very early conceptual stages. If we tried to develop some kind of defined contribution plan instead of a defined benefit plan, which we have, whether it's applied to new employees or if we give existing employees an opportunity to move from one plan to the other. One, we don't know what that means. We don't know what the state rules are around that. But in some cases, when governments develop these new plans, they try to incentivize people to move to the new plan, because the new plan will save money over the long term for the city. So in order to incentivize, sometimes you offer to contribute towards their move into the new plan, so they're not just starting from zero with their plan contributions. But there's a lot of discussions that has to go into that. If we did develop that type of plan, then we'd have to have some funding setting aside to do that. So that's why I mentioned that's one thing that I wouldn't want to completely deplete all of our reserves in case we wanted to do something like that.
Thank you. You want to move on to the next ones then? Thank you.
Oh, sure. Could I just very quickly elaborate on your response to Alderwoman Pendle Charles? The Finance Committee in their report really wanted to emphasize the fact that having ARPA has sort of blurred the fact, for lack of a better word, that our operating expenses do exceed the revenue coming in. So we took the will without ARPA if things don't change. So we showed that in a graph, and I think to answer her question, more, I guess, theoretically, but the graph clearly shows that, after fiscal year 25, we will have a challenge, and if unaddressed, fiscal year '26, that deficit could reach, from memory, like $3 million. We did sort of this projection. So we really wanted to emphasize that fact because fiscal year will be challenging without the ARPA money. And anything that dips into ARPA during this exercise, we'll have to find the funds for the following year. So, thanks. But with that, the Finance Committee, during their budget review, came up with some amendments. The first one is after we saw the presentation from the Office of Community Development, Office of Community Services, we voted to add a Hispanic Outreach Navigator, and it is paid for in this. Hold on 1 second. With unfilled positions from the police department, if I'm not mistaken. Correct. Amendment number 5
Gavin.
is we did something similar last year. We're waiting for a grant.
Alderman Tierney, can we just do them one at a time? Because Alderman Savage just had a question on
I
that.
didn't look up, sorry, yeah.
All right, thank you. Just a request for that first position. Is there a job description, kind of duty list that could be provided? And would that be in the Office of Community Caring or Mayor's
Yeah.
office?
Yes, I can ask Laura Gutierrez for that.
I believe this is a person that we already have, and they're being paid for by a grant right now, and we don't yet have proof of funding for the next year, so we wanted to make sure there was funding available. This is a very important resource for Office of Community Services.
So this money would make it a contractual position or civil servant?
Contractual.
To elaborate
Mrs. Image?
briefly, sorry, the grant is typically awarded July 1st, and we reached out to the Department of Health, was it? Anyway, we'll get that back to you. But we did reach out, and they are not making that decision during the beginning of the fiscal year. So it's conceivable that the money will be received, but our indication was that it would be well into the fiscal year we'd get that information, and we can provide that.
So if we do receive the money, it will.
We could very well be reimbursed, or depending on how they organize the payment.
Okay, correct.
Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, the next one is a little complicated, and as Jody said, the Finance Department was very helpful in finding money so that it is a one-time expense and not a recurring expense. So, for example, the next one, number 5, contributes to the ongoing substance abuse disorder program because of its success. And it's the same situation as the Hispanic liaison, that if we get a grant, we'll be reimbursed for this, if you will. But right now, as a placeholder for this amendment to move forward, it is making some cuts that I want you to be cognizant of, and that includes the $30,000 for the contractual PIO position in the mayor's office, a $19,300 of funding for civil service conversion from the police department, and $63,700 of a vacancy not filled in the police department. Can you elaborate?
I also wanted to say that in addition to hopefully getting the funding, we do automatically, well, not automatically, hopefully we're looking at a state funding of the $35,000, I believe it is, and I'm sorry, I don't.
County.
Oh, sorry, county. And also the use of the settlement funds, because they need to be used for something like a substance abuse disorder. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Director Dickinson,
So,
recognizing you, thank you.
okay. So yes, there's, this 113 was making sure that we had the state money covered in case the state grant doesn't come in at what we're hoping to be funded at for the program. And the county had guaranteed a certain base amount if the state funding doesn't come through. So this would be the difference in the funding. In addition to this, in the last few months, we've received several smaller contributions from the opioid class action lawsuits that have been going on nationwide. You know, it's a few thousand here and a few thousand there. And we don't have to use it prospectively. We can reimburse ourselves for past programs we funded, but we have tentatively decided, I mean, I've decided that we would set it aside and use it for the program as well. So I'm not sure if we're going to put it in with the other grant, if we're going to separate it in some other way under another number, another project number, but we've gotten a few of them, and we may be up around $50,000 or $60,000 total. So it's not an enormous amount of funding, but that will also be used towards the program.
Thank you. Alderman Annette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I know we're trying to do this in 2 minutes, I get it, but this one really raises a couple of questions for me, one of which is it's not clear to me where the details are for like the civil service conversion. I don't know what there. I do, first of all, I appreciate the work that our PIO does, and I appreciate that that's a big job. So when do we debate the virtues of the getting more help for the PIO versus more help for this program? And I assume that's going to be on the 5th, which I think we better bring lunch and dinner and overnight accommodations.
Sleeping bags.
But I guess my general question at this point is, how's this process to work today? We're just going to hear about them, not get any of the details, and skim through?
Yeah, I think we're going to skim through, and then if you
Okay.
have some questions at the back end, I think you can go directly to the sponsors. Also, on this particular thing for the PIO, I think Kate has sent a lot of information to you individually to make a decision on the information that she sent you for what they cover. Alderman Pindell-Charles and Alderman Savage.
Very quickly, I'm starting to look through this, and please correct me if I'm wrong and tell me I'm wrong. I'm starting to see us pitting certain departments against other departments, and that includes public safety, and I don't like that road we're going down, if that's what we're doing. If that's not what we're doing, fine, but that's what I somewhat starting to see.
Director Dickinson.
Just to that point, there were conversions that we had budgeted for, and the police department decided not to convert those positions. In addition, there's an extra position that was not, that's in there and we had funding for, but right now that position is vacant. So we pulled the funds from the vacant position. Other than that, all we did was take 2 months of turnover off of the new positions that we're adding to the budget. So I tried to identify the PIO funding was initiative of the Finance Committee. That was their idea, to pull some of the funding from the PIO position. The rest of it was funding we knew, once we took on the task of trying to identify where to fund these amendments from, we knew that there was funding there, and then we took 2 months of turnover off the new positions. So it looks like the way we did it was just kind of tiered down our resources until we funded all of your Finance Committee.
I'm looking at some whispering in the back with the police department. So I don't know what's going on, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Alderman Savage. And so we're, just to say, we're at five amendments in, and we're at 40 minutes there. And the room is spoken, or the staff are spoken for after 5 o'clock. They have to go back, and then there's several other committee meetings that they have to work on. So if we go much after 5, it's putting a lot on them. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not arguing the point, but do we need the directors here if we're not really going to have time to ask them questions?
That's a good point. Yeah, we just thought it would be good to have them. I
Yeah.
mean,
They love watching.
I mean, it is going to make it longer, but if this is just to get a rundown maybe of what our questions may be for the sponsors to help address, but I completely get it. But I mean, I had the same question as Alderwoman Pindell Charles, because I guess this was not, that position was not in the proposed budget, right? The planner position,
Which one?
the planner, emergency management planner.
Oh, we're not on.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
Yeah. So.
I thought that was number.
Well, it's one of the Finance Committee amendments. And what this chart tries to show you, the one I just spoke to, the one pager that's on your desk, the amendments listed there, the Finance Committee amendment, listed by number, and then showing you where the funding comes from for each of those amendments. And what Katie and I and Capri did, we just found the available sources we knew we had, and then the 2 months of turnover from each of the new positions, and then we just took them off one at a time until the funding was provided. And that's kind of like, you can see it's like a step down here.
I'm confused though,
So
because I thought, I'm not clear then on what is this sheet compared to the, because we have, what, 5, 6 amendments from the Finance Committee, and then we have 6 from
okay, so
Finance
look
Department
at,
for the Finance Committee. What's the purpose of this sheet?
It explains the funding sources for the Finance Committee amendments.
So there's
So
no
if you go-
difference between them.
It further explains from a visual perspective. We were trying to help you guys out to see exactly where the funding came from for each. So for example, number 1, funding for Hispanic Outreach Navigator, if you go across that one pager, you can see that full 44.3 is coming from the total of the 2 conversions that the police department did not go forward with was 63.6. So for this amendment, we only needed 44.3. And those 2 conversions that they didn't go through with were the investigative support analyst and the accreditation position.
But those were in the budget as proposed. but
Correct, we
they're
made, so
not
they were
pursuing them.
technically enhancement requests, but since the police department was not going to use them, it freed up money that was already baked in the mayor's budget to fund this position.
Okay, I think what confused me too is just the footnote for 2 mentions emergency planner, but that's a different position than what's mentioned in the next one?
Well, first, this sheet that was passed out today, I think was very quickly done after to answer my question from this morning. I wanted to make sure, as Alderwoman Charles said, that no public safety positions were jeopardized. And this clearly shows you, this table shows you that the deducts are coming from turnovers in the majority here. So it's really important that you see that these amendments got kind of complicated because of trying to find the money. And what the finance department did is they just scoured where we are today with positions and where we had money not committed to positions. So anyways, on the emergency planner.
No, it's,
What's that?
I think your confusion is it's an email received from the senior emergency planner. It's not about the emergency planner, number 2, sorry.
Oh, is that where he's looking?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you look at footnote number 2, it just says an email received from, this particular one is not about the emergency planner, the next one down is.
Okay.
Alderman Finlayson.
Thank you. First of all, let me apologize. I think when this went on my calendar, it went on Central Time, so it's at 3 o'clock. So I do apologize. Question, the opioid restitution fund, where are those dollars, and can those dollars be used to pay towards the substance use disorder program? what is it, 50,000, 55,000 or something?
Yeah, I don't have that number. We've 3 or 4 deposits now that we've gotten from the opioid restitution cases. And what I was saying, we got that this year, those funds this year. We can set them aside and use them towards the program for next year, but we're gonna have to separate them into another project or into this same project. We could use that towards this, but it's not a general fund contribution.
Okay,
I know,
but we do have that option.
We do
to
have that
use
option,
those.
but I had thought that that was going to be extra, not a part of this, but additional funding.
So extra to be used for anything else?
No, for opioid treatment programs.
Okay, so we can use it for.
We can. We could
okay.
apply it towards this, but I'd have to show it a little differently because the revenue came in this year.
Yeah, I understand.
It's not going to come in next year. So it's the way we show it here. It wouldn't show the same way.
Okay, I think that would be a good way to fund it through the restitution fund if we can, so.
You'd have to create the restitution fund first. So there's a few steps we'd have to go through, do it that way.
So right
All
now,
right.
it's just going into the general fund?
Yeah, right now it's sitting in the general fund, and I'm going to have to find a way to set it aside so it doesn't get,
Okay,
you
so
know.
we'll create a fund for those dollars.
or move it into
So
the
to earmark
grant.
it for-
Or this year, move it into the grant program so it can stay there in the grant program to be used.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I have other comments, but I'll wait.
Thank you. I'll just give you the little quick thing I gave, 48 amendments, so we're going to try to move through them, but definitely we should go to the directors if you need a question. If you can go to the sponsors outside, get some information, that helps out because we have to move through to give the space back or give the employees back for the next Historic Preservation Commission and two other ones.
And I have a 9:00 flight, so let's just move it along.
Okay.
Okay, next one, please.
trying to talk
Alderman
fast.
Tierney?
Just to address Alderman Arnett's concern, just so that these amendments are sort of mutually exclusive, I see further down that Alderwoman Arnett, number 30-something, adds back the PIO, the assistant PIO, number something, 30-something, I remember. Okay. Just 31.
Number
thank you.
31?
Yeah, FYI, Alderman. And, okay, so the emergency planner is next. That is this is turnover. As you can see in the backup, it's, we're using 79,000 of turnover in APD and 2 months of an OEM planner, and which is ironic, and then another 2 months from the mayor's budget. So the next one is, we found out that the crossing guards didn't, they need an increase in pay. So we found money there by 2 months of turnover. And that gives them a starting pay of 24 versus 20. The amendment number 8 increases the salary for the IT project manager. And that is funded again by $6,400 of turnover. And then Office of Community Services, because we're getting, money coming in on rental assistance, we thought it prudent that we have the 2 part-time, I believe they were interns, but they would stay on as staff, and again, we funded those through a turnover and also a reduction in the fleet replacement that was available. That's number 9, and I think that's, yeah, absolutely.
Alderman O'Neill?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say something about that one, number 9. These two positions were interns that came through the summer intern program last year. And they were kept on by the Office of Community Service because they were providing vital roles. And it turned out that there was some additional funding left over in that internship budget for one reason or another. And I just want to say part of the internship program really is a path to employment. It would be great to see these positions in future years continue as some of the other internships. So if there was any question about the value of the internship program, I know that some interns, had different jobs, and we retained these two, I believe 2 others throughout the program. But really that is a great way for us to start building our staff, bringing in new people interested in the city workings. So that was just my comment about that.
Thank you. Alderman Finlayson?
Thank you. I couldn't concur more. The intent of the Office of Community Caring was to develop a true office. We have 2 people, 3 people, and 2 interns, and those interns provided vital services over this last year. And so those positions should not be temporary or even contract. They should be permanent positions because there is truly enough work with especially all the programs that we're developing. So I would hope that we would continue to support those staffing positions. Just listening to these changes of the last 4 amendments, it sounds like we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. I have to ask, has staff been able to weigh in? The police department takes a big hit on a couple of things. All departments take hits. So how much collaboration are we getting? Are they saying, surely we can, do away with that position and not be impacted programmatically? That's my concern.
Director Dickinson?
First of all, for the ones where we're taking 2 months worth of the position for turnover, assuming July 1, they list a position, they advertise, they interview, and then bring somebody on board, there is some time frame where they will not have the position filled. And so taking that 2 months of turnover off of the funding shouldn't have that much of an impact for the new positions. The only other cases where we took funding away was the APD had asked for 2 conversions that they decided not to go forward with converting the positions to civil service. So there was some extra funding there. Then they had funding for a position that's currently vacant that has been changed to a new title, and they're not using it. I think that APD will tell you they would like to take the funding for that position and create a different position and use the funding for that, but it was something new in addition to what was presented in the enhancements, et cetera. So, that's the only one on here where I can see that if you were to talk to departments, they would say, oh, please don't take that.
And the PIO position that was offered by the
yes,
finance
and
committee.
you're right, and the PIO position, which the administration wanted to really maintain. So we're just trying to find it where we could, and that's a possibility, and that may affect the police department's ability to, I think it was a grants position, that they wanted to use that funding to do something else, to add something else to their position listing. So, we took it from what was vacant, that position that it's currently programmed in is no longer being used.
And the fire department seemed to have taken a hit, as well as planning, as well as MIT.
Just 2 months of turnover.
Okay, so it's all only too much towards turnover. Okay, well, I'm glad that there was some collaboration.
And I'm sure they're not ecstatically happy about it. They love to fill positions as fast as they can, but it was a way of finding places to take the funding from that wouldn't hurt as much.
Okay, Thank you.
Thank you, Director Dickinson. Number 10, Alderman Savage.
I know, I'm trying not to ask many questions, but I'm really thoroughly confused on a number of these. At some point, I do want to hear from the police as far as, because the amendment number 5 would take funding from the vacant police administrative manager position, so they would not be able to fill that in fiscal year 24, right? Amendment 6, so I would like to hear from APD on that. Number 6,
Alderman Savage,
Yes.
my understanding is that position is not needed at the police department anymore.
That was what I was just saying. They
But it
don't
was-
want it for the police administrative manager. They want it for something else.
but it was in the budget to be funded originally.
Yes, because we hadn't yet taken the funding out.
Okay. Amendment 6, talking about the emergency planner. That's the one that was a new addition to the budget, right? For OEM. At some point, I'd like to get a justification for that position.
The
That could be
emergency,
attached to the amendment or in some fashion.
so
perhaps.
what in particular are you asking about?
Well, that, it's looking to fund a brand new position, emergency planner.
Yes, that was a finance committee initiative.
We based
Yeah.
ours on review of performance measures and asked the question, what was preventing you from meeting these performance measures? And the understanding was that
Just put your microphone, thank you.
All right. We did our evaluation based on performance measures, and in this case, one of the reasons not able to accomplish some of the majority of the performance measures relating to keeping the city safe was not having that extra emergency planner. But I do just want to make one asterisk on this position, which is really important to note, is what happens next year, okay? We found the money this year, right? And, you know, some of them will be sponsored by grants continually, but I just think that's something that we all have to be cognizant of when we look at these. So I think did the chief want to say a few words, or what are we doing here?
I mean, I don't know if this is,
Yeah,
I mean, like I said, I
okay. So I'll
have
move
questions
on.
for a bunch of the departments. I don't know, we don't need to do it now, but at some point, I don't know how we want supporting information put together for these amendments. But, because I also want to ask the administration, like, was this evaluated when you put together your budget? And kind of want to know why it was determined it wasn't needed, just to compare and contrast. So I also have, I'm good with Amendment 7, crossing guards. Number 8 also looks like it would take money from an office associate position in planning and zoning. Would that hamper their ability to hire that position, or would it just delay?
Yes, it's a new position that we put in the budget this year, and it would not allow them to hire somebody for 2 months.
And that, so that money would go towards increasing the salary for IT project manager. Is this something that is going to be looked at in the class and comp study anyway? Do we need to do that now?
Mr. City Manager?
May I, the turnover really is just procedurally how long it's going to take us at the earliest to get the positions hired, the 2 months. And if you approve it, it's not going to be available until July 1st anyway.
No, I understand,
Yeah.
but it increases the salary, it takes that money to increase the salary for the IT project manager.
Right.
So is that something that should just be done? We had this whole discussion about another position. Should that just be done with the class and comp study? I don't understand how we're increasing the salary here.
The IT project manager is a position that the police department wants to, I don't know if it's converting or upgrading
this
or
is-
paying a higher contractual salary to because of the skills needed for the job. It was one of their enhancement requests that the administration did not include in the budget, but the finance committee added it back.
Okay, it's contractual, okay, that explains it. Okay. And then the number 9 regarding the Office of Community Caring, 2 positions. So this is funding for their internships?
They were interns
They were interns.
They were interns that have been working since they continued the program through the fall. So we asked that we stop calling them interns because it was getting confused in our discussions. And so we started calling them
It makes them part-time contractual.
community services support staff.
The amendment would make them part-time contractual. Okay, what would they, so without this funding, what would happen to those positions?
They'd go away.
All right, but this also presumably would delay the hiring of a planner in planning and zoning if it reduces their,
That's correct.
by how long?
2 months. So all the turnovers that you see here are 2 months.
Yeah, I mean, a better source of funding might just be the ARPA funding, frankly, because a lot of these expenses are not much, and that would get around having to move the money around from Peter to pay Paul. But I'm done.
Trying to keep it under a couple of minutes, a 9 o'clock flight.
I just want to make a comment. It may
Finlayson.
be helpful to have Ms. Gutierrez here because she can explain exactly what those positions do. I'm
But that
sorry.
happens on June 5th. And that, I mean, I asked the question early on. All we're doing right now is just saying, this is the amendment, 2 minutes. So on 10, 1, 2, 3, when the council was considering the 2 AM liquor licenses, we received a report that called for 2 full-time alcoholic beverage enforcement people. As I have attended Alcoholic Beverage Control Board meetings, I have heard the members of the board say, we're going to give you the license, but we cannot follow up and enforce what we've just licensed you for. 3, I have been getting more and more complaints about violations of the alcoholic beverage in my ward, you may have in yours. So this is to ask for some alcoholic beverage control enforcement people. It's on temporary money. If it does the job, I would presume in next year's budget and future budgets, we would make it permanent money. If it doesn't, we won't do it anymore.
Thank you for that description of amendment number 10. And remember, there's plenty of time after this to go to the individual sponsors and get information, to go to the department heads. This is just a way for us to get them out there,
Can I
okay?
just say, though, it's really important to know, that I think I got this question from Alderman Savage in a way, is that our recommendations came from the presentations of the departments, and that, you know, that's the difference between the mayor's budget and what we recommended. There was something that they presented that we didn't see in the mayor's budget, and that was our logic, but it was mostly came from their presentations and review of their enhancements, et cetera. Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you. Okay, Director Dickinson, number 11.
Yes, the next 3 are from Alderwoman O'Neill.
Number 11 is putting 2 pedestrian activated crosswalk signals, one at Cedar Park and Windell, and one at Cedar Park and Sumner, or Howison. It's Howison, sorry. Those would also move the signage that is old signage on Cedar Park and actually put it in front of the elementary school. If you don't vote for anything else on my requests, that's the one I want. It would help. Number 12, it adds a new study for a sidewalk between Farragut and on Farragut from Howison until Cedar Park, until Bestgate Road, Rowell Boulevard. It's the study. It would probably take a lot more eventually if they happen to actually put the sidewalks in, but currently you cannot walk from Cedar Park Road to West Annapolis without using the stadium path and crossing over Farragut Road 2 or 3 times. 13 is adding a study and funding for a sidewalk project from Taylor Avenue to Farragut Roads. Again, it's a situation where there's no sidewalk on Cedar Park, so people who live on Cedar Park have to cross over to the stadium in order to walk that other direction, whether they're going to school, the stadium, or if they're trying to walk downtown. That's it.
Very good.
14 is mine. guess the word is earmarks, $10,000 to the Office of Law to incorporate the Charter Committee recommendations. After Director Dickinson's introduction, I'm hesitant on this because, but then again, we would just postpone it again. And when I saw when I saw the mayor's recommendation up above about the parliamentary and all that, the Charter Commission recommendation speaks to all of that. And we ignore it every time. This was issued 2021, and the charter is outdated. They have some really viable, one of them is develop legislative procedures, et cetera. So I just think that we should make the effort in focusing on rewriting the charter. 15 is, this is very important to the residents in the school on Duke of Gloucester to add a LED speed radar sign on Duke of Gloucester, basically saying your speed is, you've seen them before, but have it permanently placed so cars will eventually get the message. It's a speed, it's just awful at nighttime specifically. This one, I think we all would like. It buys a lot of red paint, not a lot, but in working with Director Jarrow, this amendment adds $5,000 to DPW Street Division to stockpile that paint for curb painting wherever we need it touched up or where it's rubbed off, et cetera, et cetera. And I have to say, these came from me and not the department heads. I just went to the department heads for the backup. Upper Spark Creek, amendment number 17. You've all heard this about not even being able to get close to the shoreline because of all the phragmites. And this dedicates money to Parks and Recs to just clear them up and before they just keep spreading. And that is that goes over into Dwan's ward as well, just the whole Upper Spark Creek. Number 18 is, I think that's written a little bit, hold on a second. I thought that was the description's a little bit more detailed than that.
Shelters.
Yeah, I thought it was the solar panels.
Your solar panels are number 48. This one is for bus shelters, cleaning, repairing.
Okay, yeah, this is just to, citywide. I initiated it only because there are a lot of bus shelters, not a lot, but on West Street. And it's just unfortunate the way they look, and people waiting at the bus shelter, it's just awful. So this gives money to the Transportation Fund to maintain the bus shelters, number 18. And again, these are all one-time expense unless noted otherwise, but they're all one-time expense. Number 19 is, instead of just frantically looking for money, at the last minute, we have a humongous project coming up downtown that directs every access into the city of Annapolis, from Parole, from Eastport, from Rao Boulevard, and we're going to need directional signage up the wazoo. I mean, just to have it. So this is what this does, and it's $20,000 for that directional signage for traffic through the course of the disruption downtown for the next 2-3 years. I think we go on to number 20. That's Rob's.
So I'll just I have one question from Alderman Pindell Charles.
I don't know if we're taking them, but I'll definitely be a co-sponsor to number 18. I've been in touch with Director Moore on several occasions about the bus shelters, so you can add me as a co-sponsor for 18. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Alderman Savage on number 20.
Can I just ask, we're rolling along now.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question though about overall the use of the one-time use funds? Because I mean, a lot of these are for good efforts, But for example, like the paint, curbing, the curb paint and the maintenance of the bus shelters, that doesn't really, I mean, that stuff we have to do every year anyway. It doesn't seem like it's really appropriate for one-time use.
Talk about it on the 5th of June.
I'll get an answer for Jody. Yeah.
So what I'll say is,
I agree.
this is what the sponsor of the sponsor asked for it to be one-time funding. If this appears next year as a request, it'll become a recurring cost, which is how you see us address other ones that were asked for last year out of one time, and the programs are continuing, so now we've put them in recurring.
If I could add too, the intention of the paint was to really get a stockpile. There may be purchases to maintain every year, but this is to really ramp that up this year because I believe there were concerns about delays or cost of paint or something like that. And then I believe the same for the bus shelters, right? It's to really ramp up efforts versus what's been typically done to maintain. And
It's sort of in concert with an upcoming amendment so that they stay that way.
There's one coming later regarding the bus shelters that's a larger effort to maintain.
And more David Painter on the director signs for journalists as well.
Bumper Moyer takes care of that. Alderman Savage?
All right, Amendment 20, this just allocates a couple $1,000s for, it was brought to my attention that we need to update our urban tree canopy analysis, so it's associated with our tree canopy goal. This would be one-time use money because the study is not needed only every few years, it's really needed. Amendment 21 adds $100,000, and I was told actually by the deputy city manager this should be Public Works, not the city manager's office.
do you know what division that would, because I'm not sure how that would fit in DPW, so I'm trying to, we're having internal discussions regarding that, but if you could.
I don't know, check with Ms. Guile, I guess, but regardless, this would be one-time use money. So I'm trying to summarize this. So the city's been working with the Resilience Authority that we set up, and the Resilience Authority is applying for money from the state and the feds to pay for vulnerability assessments and also resiliency plans that are going to identify what projects need to get done in these vulnerable areas. And they're pursuing initially just for wards 1, 7, and 8, so focusing on the maritime districts. This money would expand that, so it includes all of our waterfront wards, so it would include wards 2, 4, and 6. I think those are our only waterfront. So it would just include the scope just to make sure there's nothing else we need to do in the entire city. So once we do this, we'll have complete coverage. Amendment 22 would add.
That's not yours.
Oh, that's not mine. I was gonna.
Okay, so I can just speak to Alderman Chandlemeyer's 3 just briefly. I may not be able to answer any detailed questions, but I'll talk about them briefly if we're ready to move on. The first one adds $8,500 to the Department of Planning and Zoning for continuation of the Economic Gardening Program. If you remember, that was a one-time funding last year, and they want to continue it. Economic Development got some extra funding in their budget this year, so they feel they can continue the program somewhat with their own funding, but needed the extra $8,500 to make it more robust. So that's what this is, and as you can see, we've put the $8,500 in the recurring costs category since it's the second year it's come up. On the next one, he's asked for $50,000 for planning and zoning to grant Anne Arundel County Workforce Development Annapolis residents to train in the maritime trades industry, and he cites that as a one-time use. That's one I don't know a lot of details on, so I don't know. We don't really have any more details on it, so you can send your questions to him. And the last one is $10,000 for planning and zoning to allow HACA to repair or install a fence between Robinwood and Hunt Meadow using one-times reserve.
If I could just add to, if any of you want to be added to any of these as a co-sponsor, please let me know, and I'll add you to it. Thank you.
And the next one,
Alderman
25.
Pindell Charles had a question.
No, just want to make a comment on 24. I had communicated with Alderman Shandemeyer in the past week about this fence, so I'm somewhat familiar with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Alderman Finlayson on 25.
Yes, thank you. 25 is my recommendation for the community grant funding. The committee did a great job. However, we received almost twice as many requests as we've ever received. And so I went in and looked at all of those first-time requests and gave them a minimal amount, $2,000 across the board, so that it was possible for me to restore funding to the Community Action Agency, the Bates Legacy Center, and the Film Festival, to bring them to a level where they were last year, and with the Film Festival to increase their funding. So everybody else gets the recommendation is that everyone else receives the funding that was recommended through the committee. The committee, I believe, and we can speak to Laura later, was probably overwhelmed with the number of applicants, and so their process was a little different. But anyway, so these are my recommendations. I've been asked for the last 10 years to make these recommendations, so I did it again this year.
Thank you.
One other thing, I'm not sure of the 28,450, because my calculation, I was $150 less than the mayor's budget.
So what
allocated.
that column reflects, when you said you were adding back funds to 3 organizations, that 28,000 is that total add back. There were offsets on the other side, and the offsets actually saved us $150. And you
Okay.
see that in the general fund impact column, which shows the net impact of what we did.
Got it, thank you.
Thank you. 26.
26 is also mine. That is a request for funding for the Adopt a Community program. That program was late getting started, but as of March, 10 organizations have been working in our communities with a vengeance, and I will share the data, but there's actually data of their impact already. They have created a consortium, and they are working to share resources, share benefits, share opportunities, and they are already working with the superintendent of schools and other organizations, and they are looking to bring additional funding. This is an opportunity to create a volunteer cadre of people, they call themselves a consortium, who will be working in the communities with the greatest need. I had requested that it be one-time cost because it's the second year, but I don't foresee them needing our funding after next year. But from what the city finance director said, because it's our second year request, then it moves to that other column. Is that?
Yeah, well, if you want to call it one time, that's how we're approaching these that were funded last year, and they said they're one-time funds, and they're coming again this year. We're putting them in the recurring column. I hadn't heard that you feel like this is going to be the last year they're going to need funding, and why that cuts off. So that's an argument we could make, but
I'm comfortable with whichever column you feel it should go in. But I employ my colleagues to seriously consider the funding of this program again.
Thank you. Alderman Pindell Charles.
Thank you, Mr.
27.
Mayor. Number 27, $5,000 to fund a Rec and Parks program for a feasibility study for a youth tennis court on the campus of Walt S. Mills Parole Elementary. For one time, Mayor and I and the former director of Rec and Parks did a site visit to the couple in the community who have been providing this for years and years, decades, for free. They're getting up in age, and they are interested in handing it over to someone else, but being on the campus of the school. This money, this $5,000 was in fiscal year '23. However, because every thing was focused on Annapolis United, we did not have an opportunity to get to this. And I spoke with the mayor about this, and he's in support of just pretty much transferring the money from fiscal year '23, the 5,000, to fiscal year '24. So this really isn't coming out of the fiscal year '24 budget.
I will comment on that just briefly. If there's something that was programmed to be used out of the one-time reserve and it didn't get done, we're going to add it back to the balance of the one-time reserve. And there are some things that have all, in that $1.7 million number, have been added back already. I'm not sure if this is one of them, but we do track each effort to see if it wasn't done, then we can add it back to the balance.
Okay. Same goes for number 28, for the feasibility study for the historic Clay Street Adams Park open space at the bottom of Clay Street, to give that community an opportunity for some outdoor recreation. Again, the former director and I were focused, as well as the other 3 departments, on Annapolis United. So this again was another $5,000 that was in fiscal year '23, but was not used at all in fiscal year '23. So asking that it be used, just, I'm gonna say transferred over into fiscal year '24. Number 29, there was same thing almost, $1,600 in a fund to be used for Birth to 5 community events. The organization that was supposed to do this event moved out of this area and is no longer available, of course, to do this. In the meantime, I talked with staff from the mayor's office, and I keep getting NAM and Violence Interrupters Program confused, but I'm sorry. But there is a staff person who is working with young mothers, to-be mothers, and this would be for those, for that usage, we're going to be doing pop-up baby showers in the different challenged communities, and this money would be used for that. So we cannot use the initial person who could do it because they're no longer available and out of the area, but use either NAM or Violence Interrupters, I can't ever get it right, for that as well. And I don't want to name the staff person because I think we're not supposed to do that. Anyway, and that's 1,600. Number 30, amendment adds 1,000 for the mayor's office for the African American Equal Protection Task Force. That position, I think, started in February. This was as a result of several residents that came to me. One actually also came to Alderwoman Finlayson, and we're still working in that with that person, where we think that there needs to be a lens as far as I'm sorry, wrong number. Sorry. I think that's not it. I'm sorry.
This will be your task force.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's not the one. Take that back. This is the one where there was supposed to be a report done from a resolution that the council passed a few years ago. There was a final report to be done. The final report has not been done. I had gone to the previous city manager last year to put this in, and he indicated no need to put this resolution in because because it was their understanding that the 1,000 could be found. I've talked to our current city manager and also sent an email, and this was supposed to be investigated, the $1,000, so I'm not quite sure where that stands at this point, but we can talk about that offline later. Okay. Number 31. We are looking at $30,000 for funding to the Mayor's Office for Public Information Officer, contractual, using ARPA one-time funds, reoccurring, looks like on the list, where the current public information officer would be requesting some help. And we've all gotten several verbal reports from the our chief of staff. We've also gotten something more recent from our chief of staff with some data included. But I will ask this, I was speaking with someone in the office, and the amount, the quality of work that is currently being provided by our current public information officer, if we had to pay for this through a private organization, we would be talking about well over $200,000 a year. That really resonated with me because I'm aware that this type of work can be expensive. And so that was brought to my attention recently. Number 32, $100,000 for construction on Northwest Street Park. Alderwoman O'Neill and I have attended several meetings concerning the Robert Eads Park, but this came up also peripherally. And so water access, I think this would be a perfect opportunity for this community. And so I am looking at a capital projects fund for $100,000 for the Northwest Street Park, which is right around the corner from the Stanton Community Center. Anyone have any questions?
Katie,
Yes,
can you
Alderwoman
add me as
O'Neill.
a sponsor? Is that one, please?
Thank you.
32.
I have a question. This says it's approved state grant funding?
I think we got that from the state already. That funding is from the state. Is that right, Katie?
Ms. Pettit?
The 100,000 for Northwest Street. Delegate Dana Jones reached out to us. She was looking for a project. We suggested Northwest. We told her it'd be somewhere between 50 to 100, and the state have supplied that, or will be supplying that 100,000. So that's not coming from our budget. So
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Mr. Mayor.
I believe so. Director Dickinson?
Do you want to, your other one would have been right here on the list too, if you want to speak to the other one.
Yes.
Okay. United,
Atlas United? Yep.
trying to get the funding back to a higher level.
Oh, yes.
We've spent, in answer to your question that you were seeking, 140 about, so to
I
complete.
wasn't sure what the number was.
Yeah, so there's 140, that would be like 45,000 that went unspent.
Okay, that included the person that resigned from their position as well?
That includes all the costs for the program to date.
So you said 40,
140,
140 had been spent.
correct.
Okay, so the amendment would be for 45,000. I gotta use my fingers. Is that correct?
We've got 100,000 in there right now.
Right. And to bring it to level funding from
We're
last
talking
year
about
would be
Annapolis United. Right.
45, yes. I'm just, make sure I got my math correct. 185 last year, minus 140 is
Yeah.
been spent, so we're talking about level funding up to,
She's trying to get it to the amount spent this year.
Which would be 145, right?
okay, so what's the
I think
difference?
45 is correct,
Okay.
45.
And what I'm gonna say is, we had a public safety meeting on Monday, and Director Johnson from Rec and Parks was there, and she, very impressed, she brought to us a teen program that they will be starting this fiscal year. And what I indicated to her was, not only, and Chief Jackson is here as well, we're going to be getting some data, part 2 of the presentation from Annapolis United on Monday, but we're going to get a part 2 and get some clarification on the data. But we're also going to be moving to a teen club with Rec and Park. So I am confident that that 185 will be spent. I think I had indicated to Mr. Malinoff earlier that the money was going to be spent because there was not many activities being during the winter time. And so that way, the money was going to be spent probably starting in March of 2023. We had a week of spring break and then 2 weeks left at the end of the school year, so that additional money was planned to be spent during that time period. But now that we have Director Johnson here, I'm sure that that money can also, for fiscal year '24, be used for the teen club as well.
And we are not doing bad on time, just going to point that out. Alderman Gay had his hand up first, and
Just
Alderman Finlayson.
Really quickly, for finance only, not on the topic of Annapolis United, how are we, or how are you able to level set a program using one-time funding? Is that correct? The 45,000?
It's not on the list because it slipped through the cracks. It's one that she had asked for that we forgot to put on the list. So I think it's going to be recurring because I think the 100 went, Right, so it was a program last year, but since it was requested again for this year, we put 100,000 in so far, and that's a recurring cost now. So this will go in as recurring cost.
And would you be able to also provide us, because I'm lost, of how much actually was spent for the Annapolis United, excuse me, in this fiscal year?
So that's what we were just talking about. They had
that the
budgeted
40?
185, we've spent like 141 to date, but then it sounds like there might be more things coming through, so I'm not sure that's the complete picture.
I have not talked to Director Johnson. I'm assuming that there may not be, but only she can answer that question.
So, because what I'm seeing a lot, and I'm not trying to play budget police, but you all did this to me, is programs are using reoccurring funding, or I'm sorry, using one-time funding, when it shouldn't be, because they use one-time funding to fund
So
these programs.
we will not consider this one-time funding anymore. Because it's the second year of the program, it's going to go into the recurring column.
Okay, I'll talk to you about the other two that I see that thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Finlayson.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I had prepared a presentation to explain the successes of the Adopt a Community program. I did not deliver that information because we were told we had 2 minutes. So I feel I'm at a disadvantage because I haven't had the opportunity to go into great detail. So I know you're saying that we're going to do this on
The 5th.
the 5th. Okay, I just wanted to be clear that, I was prepared to go into detail and to justify and provide the data, but I
wouldn't
followed the rules.
I wouldn't say it was too extensive an explanation by Alderman Pindell-Charles, but I would love to give you a chance to just speak to it for a few minutes after Alderman Pindell-Charles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to just make one clarification for Alderwoman Finlayson. My understanding was it was 2 minutes per number. So I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I guess 12 minutes, but that's okay. Sorry if I went beyond that.
No worries. And I'm just going to give you a few minutes there, Alderman Finlayson.
Well, I just wanted to highlight the successes of the program thus far. We heard from Charting Careers at the council meeting on Monday night, talking about, I'm sorry, my mic isn't on. Okay, I'm on now. We heard from Charting Careers on Monday night with the community and how they've begun to collaborate and work together. The Annapolis Trust, who has adopted Annapolis Gardens, has been meeting for 4 weeks. They've signed up 57 students. They have validation that 69% of their kids have improved in their behavior, and 83% through the student survey has said that they are encouraged to work together and thinking about their future. This group has done 2 community meetings. On the 17th, they hosted 50 kids, and those kids have been allowed to design that new community center. The organization has worked with Landex, who owns the property, and they've given them the community center, and now the kids are allowed to design that community center, and it's going to be opening on the 29th, and you are all invited to join, where they have tons of teen activities. And so this group, along with the other 10, as I said briefly earlier, have created a consortium. Sigma Gamma Foundation is working with high school kids and are working to give them Chromebooks and to help them with their SAT. They're doing SAT prep so that when these kids graduate, they will be prepared to go on to college. So I say all that to say that there's a number of great things going on with these community groups who have stepped up. They have gone beyond what was asked of them in the grant proposal. And while I had hoped that they would get together and work together, they've done it independently and are moving ahead. And we can now create such a strong group of community folks who want to work in our communities that have the greatest need. So this program, and it's just not me, it's not about me. It's about the community, the communities, all 6 of them or 8 of them that are being served by this group. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity.
And I think that's more than fair. You only had 2 amendments. You deserve some more time. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next up, Alderman Arnett.
Thank you. I'll take part of my 2 minutes to say, Alderwoman Finlayson, I really want to hear a more definitive report because you're asking for a lot of money, but I think they are doing a lot of good. So, and I think the 5th, and I don't think the 5th is going to be enough, but that is the time when I'm going to be more receptive to hear that, and I want to hear more complete report. 1, 2, 3 on 33. I think that many believe that one of the most spectacular views in the state of Maryland, if not in the country, is looking down historic Main Street and out onto the harbor. 2, we are getting ready to spend tens of millions of dollars improving that view with our city dock revitalization. And 3, if we want to make this change, and because of the reason for doing city dock, which is storm level management, I think we're going to have to need to think about Duke of Gloucester Street, and particularly during repairs, but also because we really don't have a fully fleshed out floodplain plan. So I think we need a way to come across the bridge and come up the hill immediately. So, but that's just my thoughts. I ask that we do a study and verify that.
Thank you.
Can I
Obviously,
co-sponsor this as well?
Thank you. Obviously, we all want to leave this place a little bit better than the way we found it. I'm a big supporter because that's the money view. That's how people fall in love with the city. Thank you so much, Alderman Arnett. Next up, Alderman Savage again.
Yep, Amendment 34, this would add funding for City Council legislative aid using ARPA money. It'd be a contractual position, so we can determine whether or not it's going to be of use or not. I think it would. But I did email around a list of job duties that was drafted, and the amount is based, it came from HR as far as what type of position she thought this should be and what they should get funded. Amendment number 35 is $50,000 of one-time use money, which would go towards a feasibility study looking at a hiker-biker trail from Bay Ridge Ave to Tyler Ave. There's currently a railroad grade. There used to be a railroad that went through there, and so this study would look to see if we still have any kind of right-of-way or easement going through there. Look at what kind of challenges might be presented and what we could do about those challenges if it's something we might be able to pursue. There's a lot of unknowns, that's why. And this, I think, would be grouped into, there's an overall plan and zoning study, I think, on Bay Ridge Road for bike traveling. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Alderman Gay, number 36.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 36 is for the use of the Office of Economic Development to administer the appropriation to establish a grant for African-American small and startup businesses. The fund should be split into 5 $10,000 and 10 $5,000 grant and distributed to traditional or e-commerce businesses in the city of Annapolis. The remaining $5,000 are to be used by the Mayor's Office African-American Liaison to coordinate an event with major business organizations, county and state economic development staff, and those necessary to inform potential applicants of services for small and startup businesses. Obviously, we have a lack of African-American businesses in the city. I think this is just a way to incentivize those that do exist, and particularly those trying to move into brick and mortar. One of the main deterrents is obviously rents. And so providing a grant for those businesses, I think, is essential.
Thank you.
Number 37, Number 37, the fund should be used to identify a consultant with experience in assisting local governments in developing basic income programs. So obviously, I brought this amendment forward. This will be the fourth time, just in a different way. In the previous years, I've attached the actual funding to it for the city, but we had some reasonable disagreements on the distribution of funds, and so this is to give us, to provide a consultant the funding so that we can follow in the footsteps possibly of cities like Baltimore that have partnered with small banks and nonprofit organizations to provide financial literacy and manage the distribution of funds. Yes.
Can you just provide some more information about what the consultant would? Not now, I'm saying in the future.
Yeah. I'm ready for Monday.
Number 38.
He wants to be a co-sponsor.
Alderman Arnett, you want to be a co-sponsor on that? Okay.
I think I am actually going to strike, still not there yet, okay. The amendment adds, Amendment 38 adds $3,000 of funding to the Office of Emergency Management to allow for the Warming Center staff to be paid $15 an hour. I don't think I initially included for this to be using ARPA funding, but it was changed by the finance staff, which I'm fine with, but, and I did not have a discussion with the OEM director about this. I actually met with the Lighthouse director, and the governor just signed, obviously, the $15 minimum wage into effect. They don't make $15, so we need to just offset the cost there.
Director Dickinson will explain that.
Yeah, I think we talked about this before you came in, that the recurring cost column is identifying expenses that will continue to occur in future years, and the only revenue source we have at this time to program for those is ARPA. So when we're adding a recurring cost, we're citing ARPA funds that we would have used in FY 25, that we're now going to have to use towards these expenses.
Am I allowed to question on my own amendment or no?
No, I'm just trying to give you an explanation.
Yeah, which I completely agree with, and I'm wondering that if, instead of using ARPA, because I know that fund was tight, could it just be added into the OEM's budget in some way, shape, or form, since it's such a small amount, $3,000?
It is going into the OEM's budget.
Okay, so
and contractual services, because we use an agency to do those services, and they're going to be able to pay their staff more.
But I'm saying the initial $3,000, they don't have just $3,000 so that you don't have to use the ARPA funding?
I think OEM has a very small budget.
Okay, that's
I mean, we
fine.
did give them extra money in the budget, but they're going to use it for other purposes.
Okay.
Thank you.
She has a question.
I'll be a co-sponsor for that. It's a good one. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick
On O'Neill.
Sorry. In OEM's budget, there already is $14,600 in winter relief funding, which I have as my notes is that it was increasing the pay. Is that?
Is that correct, Director Simmons?
Good afternoon, Kevin Simmons, Director of Office of Emergency Management. When we first granted the enhancement, minimum wage was $13.25, and that's what we based the enhancement on. Since then, the Governor Moore had signed a document, a decree saying that it's moved up to $15 an hour starting in October. So this would actually close the gap. And again, we got $10,000 from the Department of Human Services, I believe, to contribute toward this as well. So where we asked for about $14,570, now all we needed was $4,570 plus the $3,000.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Finlayson?
So should the request be 7,000 instead of 3?
So we already have, we already have that, now we're adding to it.
Thank you.
So we already have the $4,570, so we're adding to it with the 3,000,
So
correct?
that will get you to the 15.
That will get me to the 15.
Okay, thank you. My question, I guess it's for our HR director. I'd like to know now how many positions we have that we're paying less than the $15 minimum wage.
So this
sorry.
particular issue, this is a,
This is a
Less than
nonprofit.
tech,
a
right now, less than
nonprofit,
tech.
Blessed in Tech.
Okay.
so they're paying their own staff. So they're not employees or contractual employees of the city. But every time a minimum wage is adjusted, the city increases pay for those that aren't yet making the minimum wage.
So we will do that automatically for our
Correct.
city staff?
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Sims.
Thank you.
Next up, Alderman Gay, 39.
Awesome. The amendment adds $150,000 of funding to Recreational and Parks Administration Division for a consultant to study uses and modifications of Collison Field, Pump House Road using the one-time reserves funds. I think, in particular, poor Director Johnson, since she's got here, every youth sports team has been fighting over access to fields, pools, courts, everything. We need more fields. We need, we just don't have the capacity to run youth sports in the way that I think we would like to. And I know that's been something that we've all talked about. We have this field. They do cute intramural sports there right now, but it could be something else. And we could also, have additional revenues from that. I know there's concern about the sizing and all of that stuff. I've talked to some people that think that, it could work, but I just think we should at least study and see what could fit there. I don't know. It may should have been a capital improvement request, but
It's for a study, though, right? Yeah.
It's a study.
It may or may not.
Yeah, it
Turn into
may or may
something
not result in a capital project.
Thank you. Alderman Finlayson, and then Alderman Tierney.
So for the sponsor, Alderman Gay, because I think all the fields, there needs to be a study to determine how all of our facilities are being used. This only refers to the Collison Field. But would there be benefit in including the study of all of our recreational fields and the pool included?
Well, I didn't include that, in particular the two diamonds at Truxton Park, because I figure you keep the two baseball facilities so that you can have kickball, baseball, softball, all of that. But I think the need, at least from when I'm talking to parents in the Recreation Advisory Board in regards to youth sports, is some sort of athletic field for like lacrosse, soccer, etc. And I don't know of any other fields that the city owns outside of like the Spa Road area that could accommodate a study of such. And so that's why I just kept it like this. I'm open to amend it if you'd like, to include all.
I just think, and I'd love to hear from the director whether there is a need to evaluate the use of all of our fields. I know we don't have a long field, which is what you're describing. But I also know that Williams Whalen is offline for right now. And I'm sorry, Alderman Arnett, we have to, while we're on it, I know.
We're not doing bad, Alderman Arnett.
Good afternoon. For the record, Rosalind Johnson, Director of Recreation and Parks. I think we definitely do need a study. This could be part of the master plan. There's already been monies that have been dedicated to the master plan for Recreation and Parks, which we have not done in a considerable amount of years. I believe there's $450,000, and we have not started that process. We do have a procurement director on board now, and we're hopeful that the procurement director will allow us to figure out the quickest way to be able to start the master plan for the Department of Recreation and Parks. One of the pieces we've been looking at is having a cooperative agreement with another jurisdiction that had already put a master plan out to bid, and then having those consultants bid on our master plan. That's the quickest way we could get it through.
So is there a need for this 300? Is it 300?
It's 150.
150, if it's already going to be done in your master plan study?
We have not gotten any information back on how much the master plan will cost. I can tell you that we have done master plans in other jurisdictions, and we're much smaller. So I do believe preliminarily it could be included, this piece could be included in the monies that have already been allocated.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just give some clarity through the state, through Speaker Jones. We did get something like 500,000. We used some of that for playgrounds, the new playgrounds at Truxton. And Eric Lashinsky suggested that we do this Parks Master Plan. So that has been in the budget for a while. I guess it's in motion, but it's not finalized yet. So we are in the midst of doing that. So
Thank you. I'd like to be a co-sponsor if we're going to keep.
Thank you so much. Keep it in consideration. You know, we need fields. And I appreciate the director expanding on that as well. Amendment, which one am I on?
Gavin?
Oh, okay.
Gavin?
And Amendment 40, the fund should be used by the Office of Community Development to create a loan program for small landlords to repair deferred maintenance projects on properties rented to tenants whose income is considered to be below the AMI. Let me just go into explanation on this. It's $1 million, creates a loan program to create opportunities for city landlords to increase affordable housing options. After procurement, the Housing and Community Equity Development should evaluate recommendations. If the landlord chooses to use the funds to make necessary improvements to their rent unit, they will be required to rent to families at an affordable rate for 7 consecutive years. The renting rate required per unit, so for example, if you update 2 units, you have to you have to rent each unit for 7 years. It can't be, you know, consecutive. It has to be separate. Affordable means units where rent is affordable to tenants at 80% to 120% of the area median income adjusted for household size is published and annually updated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. So that's for one person right now, but I'll send you the full chart for families. So 80 to 120% is starting at $60,000 to $99,000. So these are working class families, okay? This is not subsidized housing, which I have nothing against, but I understand the direction that the world is moving in. Let me just wrap up here.
Just
Got a few, I got a few questions.
one comment.
Just 2 quick points.
I'm going
just
to come
2
to
quick
you.
points. Small landlord means a landlord that has ownership interest in not more than 5 residential properties and not more than 15 residential units. That's the state definition because the city didn't have one in the books. And financial assistance is not to exceed $50,000 per unit. If you are a landlord and you use less than $10,000, you are not required to pay back any interest. If you use over $10,000, you're required to pay back interest at a low rate.
Thank you. Alderman Tierney, then Alderman Pindell Charles, and then.
Yeah, I had my
Alderman Arnett.
hand raised before. I just wanted to be a co-sponsor on 39 for the park review. And I know it might change to incorporate other parks, but I just think it's necessary,
So
39.
co-sponsor on 39, did you say?
Correct, yeah. Sorry, I had my hand
And
raised before.
co-sponsor on 40. Thank you.
And on the 3 Sheldon
All right.
Any other questions on 40? No?
Alderman Pindell Charles.
Yeah, based on what I'm seeing with number 40, I probably will have to abstain.
Thank you. Alderman Gay, 41.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Number 41, I'm using, I think they still have it as, adds $100,000 of funding to the Office of Community Services for the Family and Children Success Grant. It uses general fund and the fleet replacement fund. So this was a program that I did last year. I did not use one-time reserves to bring it back. So instead, I used 50 from the general fund and 50 from the fleet replacement fund. I likely will never bring this program back, but because it was a new program last year, we piloted it. It did extremely well, but as the Alderwoman alluded to with her program, we had some issues dispersing the funding in the beginning. So some of the programs didn't get to take full advantage of the childcare during the summer months. And so I'm bringing it back on a much smaller size. It was 250 last year, 100,000, just so that they're able to have a trial with that program as well.
Thank you.
And this was daycare. This was the services that we partnered with daycare services and paid for childcare throughout the summer and eventually into the school year. So, number 42, the amendment adds $100,000 to the police department for a neighborhood watch program. It uses $50,000 from the general fund and $50,000 from the fleet reserve fund. And for me, I think, look, the fund should be used by the Annapolis Police Department and No Harm Organization to create or revive, because I see signs up. There's one in front of my grandmother's house, like Neighborhood Watch, but I highly doubt they're still active. It's been there for like 15 years. to revive the Neighborhood Watch program. And I put in parentheses, subject to name change, because I've already received some complaints from the public about that. At least $60,000 should be used for stipends. These are for, who we'd identify as like Neighborhood Watch captains, etc. $10,000 for training, and the remaining balance for marketing, signage, and community surveillance materials. I'm really, really big on like these Nest, Zooms, or Rings, all of that crap, because it helps. It really does. And, some people can't get it on their own. I think this is just a way to sneak in some dollars so that our community are able to take advantage of those and, have that in the community.
Can I co-sponsor that too? My residents want that.
Mr. City Manager?
Michael Malinoff, City Manager. When it comes to the vehicle replacement fund, I would suggest, if you go down the route, Council, I would suggest having the Finance Department weigh in on funding. I've been here during a period of time when we couldn't replace our solid waste vehicles and bus vehicles because we didn't have a fund. We created a fund, and I just counsel you against starting to take funds from that fund because could put us back where we were.
Did that fund have, I think, when I looked at it, I think it was like $4 million and some change in it?
Right, but it's, if you keep in mind that the police have take-home vehicles and various other things, the fund is based on basically a depreciation schedule of the value of the vehicles and when we have to replace them. And it seems to be working fairly well. I'm only counseling you that is probably something the finance director and the Department of Public Works should look at before it's just done. Because it's been a time in this city where we weren't able to buy vehicles, and I think the program seems to be working pretty well.
And Director Dickinson had your hand up, then I'll go to Alderman Finlayson and then Alderman Savage.
A couple of things on these last two. It cuts the contingency allocation, which we keep, it's about 400,000, a little bit over. That's there for snow, major events that we need for emergencies. This takes a total of 100,000 from contingency, so that would be a little lower. We don't always need it for snow, but again, don't know what could happen this year. And it does in fact reduce the amount that the fleet manager can spend on vehicles. And the $3 million is higher than the previous years. The fleet manager has asked for increased funding so he can start replacing some of his real old vehicles. He feels like he's behind on his replacement program. So just like we just talked about, if you want to ask questions of the fleet manager and DPW about how this impacts their program. And then I was just commenting on how it impacts your contingency budget for unexpected snowstorms, that type of thing. Can I back up to number 40 for a minute? It's important to note that if this program moves forward, the council is going to have to create a new fund in the code, like the sprinkler fund. And so that's follow-up legislation that would have to occur. I mean, I do have concerns about the resources we have to manage this size of a program, but we can talk about that at a later date.
Thank
you so much for the director jumping in just quickly, because it's my amendment. So 40, as I mentioned in the beginning, it would not be taken on by our staff because for some reason we significantly underfund our Office of Community Services and they only have 2 staff members. So the plan is to outsource that. I've talked to organizations in the city that have experience in housing rehabilitation programming. And so we just need to be able to identify someone willing to take on this task. And I'm willing to get into discussion about that on the 5th, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because, some programs some of the nonprofits have even expressed concern just about general timelines. And I'm not gonna hide anything, but I do think it's critically important in considering the lack of housing that we have. And then just to follow up on the director's notes and the city manager's note, yes, it did come from the contingency fund. I think when I looked at it, it had like 450 or 400 and something in there. So I think this would drop it to like 1 something. And then the fleet reserve, it did have like $4.4 million in there.
It's $3 million.
Okay, 3 point, well, in the book it's at 4. But yeah, so, I don't intend to, make that the piggy bank, but I think it's for an important reason. Amendment 43, this amendment asks 25.
I just got some questions still. Can I just go?
still?
Alderman Finlayson and then Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Mr. Melanoff, did we have a list of all of our vehicles?
Yeah.
So could you share that? Because I know how long it took us to put all of our vehicles in one place. And so I think it might help to know exactly what the volume is. So if you could provide that to us. Alderman Gay, Neighborhood Watch, and you're right, it's been around for a long time, and it's diminished over time, and is much for safety. People were less willing to volunteer. So my question is, have you talked to Chief Jackson? Because that has always been run out of APD. They did the training for the community members who volunteered. So is there, and I think there's a national program also, I'm not sure, but there may be some other assistance.
So we talked about it in your finance committee meeting very briefly. And he suggested, or I suggested, the Neighborhood Watch program. They all shook their heads and agreed that it would be a good program, so I put the funding in the budget for it. In my description that I sent to the finance department, it says that the funding should go to the police department. But I did think that it was important that they collaborate with the No Harm organization, and because, like you said, one, obviously it's a safety thing. Two, I think we want to identify the best individuals in the community to have relations with the police department, and to go through trainings on how to properly run a neighborhood watch program, and that's why I put the $10,000 in for training as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Alderman Savage.
Yeah, on 40, just throw out another idea. I think the city manager, may have been here in DNEP when there was another option might be partnering with a bank, because I think we did so for energy efficiency improvements. Partner with a bank who can offer low interest loans. On 42, seems like ARPA funds might be more appropriate, or another option. I'm kind of hesitant to take money out of fleet replacement because that can be a safety issue as well for employees.
Can I make a point of clarification?
Yes.
The fleet replacement fund in total is 4.6 million. However, the line specifically that you are hitting is the general fund contribution to the fleet replacement fund, which is $3.1 million.
So the 4.6 was.
It comes from other funds.
All right, so it's 3.
It's coming from the enterprise funds, and the other funds are giving that extra million to
So 3.1 million, 100,000 what I'm requesting. Okay.
Thank you. Alderman Gay, number 43.
This amendment adds $25,000 of funding to the Human Resources Office for the proposed internship program. We'll save that for Monday. It needs to be fully funded so that we can at least bring back the same amount of kids that we did last year. It's giving me a stroke literally already as you see my heart pumping. Amendment 44. The amendment reallocates $10,000 of community grants from Anne Arundel County. Hold on, I need to take a breath.
Alderman Gay, just on
I'm going
43.
through it, I am.
Alderman Gay, so on 43, how many kids was that last year, just for my record?
Last year, I think we had 55 at the end.
55?
I can pull up every record for you. You got all the names and
Just
stuff.
a number
I can
to
send
work
that-
with. Thank you. Yeah.
Send that to the full council. But they have 95,000 budget. You remember last year we had 150, but I gave 95 to Rhonda so that the Anne Arundel Workforce Development could bring in interns and get paid as well. And so that's that.
Was that the 55 plus Anne Arundel County workforce guys, people? Was that plus the Anne Arundel County?
No, this is just for the cities.
So 55, and then how many did Anne Arundel County bring in?
No, last year their request was 92. And so
43.
I have not
43.
spoken to them specifically about that. That is certainly a conversation that possibly Alderman Gay can have with Anne Arundel Workforce Development. I'm not saying that the money, they're requesting the money, but they may have some folks that they know of in Annapolis. That's my only suggestion.
And the thing is that also, and I, on the, well, never mind, I'm not gonna, if she wants to
Thank you.
bring it up, I'll bring it up.
44?
Mayor Buckley.
I think,
Sorry. Director Dickinson?
I wanted to clarify that the total amount for the program was $200,000 last year. We gave $95,000 to the county for their program. So there was $105,000 for the internship program. And we've given, how much?
95,000 is currently in
95, so the delta is 10. The pay rates may be adjusted slightly. In addition, there was funding left over in the summer that was carried into the fall and into the winter to continue paying interns through the year. So the summertime did not utilize the full amount of the 105.
Okay, thank you.
and that's how we ended up getting the interns for the rental assistance program. And like you said earlier, Alderwoman O'Neill, I was listening on my way here. It is important that the internship program be a pipeline to opportunities for city jobs. This is not kiddie play. They shouldn't be managing or watching or overseeing rec programs. They should be getting actual experience to understand it and know what it takes to work in a city environment, you know? And so we can get into that discussion Monday. Should I move on to 44?
Please, thank you.
This amendment reallocates $10,000 of community grants from Anne Arundel County to Community Action Agency to the Lighthouse Shelter. This was a program that did not complete the midterm requirements, and I think they missed the initial application deadline. And so I'm removing $10,000 from that program to bring them, the Community Action Agency, to a total of $10,625, and the Lighthouse Shelter to a new total of $30,000.
Thank you.
Should I move on to 45?
Please.
45 moves $10,000 from Maryland Hall and $5,000 to the Live Water Foundation, bringing the Live Water Foundation's total to $16,000, and move $5,000 from Maryland Hall over to Charting Careers, bringing their total to $19,000 even. And it'll put Maryland Hall at a balance of $10,000. We're talking about Maryland Hall, a mega institution funded by the state, bears the name of Mike Bush. There's no way they don't have $20,000, and we should be utilizing the community grants that we have for smaller nonprofits. I love Maryland Hall and the partnerships that we do with them, and they host great events, film festival, the Taco Fest was just fantastic, but our $20,000 can go elsewhere. That's just my opinion. I'm speaking for myself. And Amendment 45 moves $10,000 from London Town and South County Heritage Incorporated to the center of, or Centro Diuta. So their new total would be $21,250. And the Annapolis, London Town, and South County Heritage, their total will be $11,000. And I think that concludes my amendment.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, no questions, Alderman Attorney, 47?
Yes, 47 is, reallocates 6,000 community grants the London Town, from the London Town and South County Heritage area to the Lighthouse and the Anne Arundel Food Bank. A quick question, why is it showing as a cost when my, to the Finance Department, when my objective was to transfer?
So the total cost column is just reflecting the dollar amount of what you're doing.
Okay.
You moved $6,000. But the net general fund impact column shows you the net impact of what you did.
Got it, okay. Just to explain my logic there, because I know it's, I agreed with the committee recommendations based on their logic, but the Lighthouse is our only shelter, our only city shelter, and their volume increase, and I can hand this out Monday, their volume increase since fiscal year 18. For example, their annual intake in fiscal year 18 was 449, and now they're doing that per quarter. Averaging 1,200 per year. And so, I'm not saying that our contribution has to reflect that as, 4 times as much, but at least acknowledge that it has to change from what we've been giving them, because, again, they are our only shelter. And the other thing I wanted to point out there is that, if you look at performance measures, they also place homeless. Their objective is to place homeless into safe, permanent housing, and they've been very successful in doing that as well. The next one is, it was the one that kind of goes hand in hand with bus shelters. And this is really, this is exciting, I think. It's adding solar panels on the existing shelters. And there's a two-pronged effort here. We're going to clean them up, and then if we put solar panels on, they'll be lit, all night, and they can, you can see the ads, so there is some, possible revenue there. But the thing about these bus shelters, it's sort of like the broken windows theory. You wait for a bus in, no offense, director, but in one that has just markings on the glass and it just looks terrible, is you're just standing there saying, why am I standing here in this? The city doesn't really care much about bus transit if they're not taking care of where I'm waiting for one. So anyway, so this is pretty cool. It's environmental, and the price came from the director, so.
Thank you. Alderman Pindell Charles.
Certainly, I'm not trying to minimize this. I just will ask the director offline, is there any sort of grant opportunities for these? But we could talk about that offline. Thank you.
Okay. And Alderman O'Neill, you're just adding yourself as a sponsor on that? Is it?
Not at this point.
Alderman O'Neill?
I'll get that. Alderwoman O'Neill has.
O'Neill, did you add it as a sponsor? Okay, sorry, just saw your hand go.
I just want that sort of clarification.
Sure. Thank you. All right, Director Dickinson.
I just want to make sure we're moving on to the resolutions for fees and fines. They're on the back page of the sheet. If we've covered the 48 amendments, we still have a little time to talk about these.
Okay, you want to lead that for us? Thank you.
So the first 3 are corrections that we're making. The first 2 are corrections that we need to make to the fee schedule to bring them in line with what the department intended. We got to update the Stantec study fees for some of the water and sewer, not water and sewer, the watershed restoration and the refuse fees that we adjusted have to be reflected. And the next one is the correction of some of the Rec and Parks fees. And then the third one comes from Alderman Savage. So if you want to.
Oh, I have a question on number 2, though.
Okay.
Attorney?
So the corrected R&P fees for the fields, the corrected ones, does the fee waiver that we're talking about for the softball team, is that correct, or is it less? The one that's before us.
Director Dickinson.
So any analysis that we did of an existing resolution would have been based on the current fee table. And I think there were some changes made, recommended through this resolution that they're taking back, right? They're not going to change them this year. They're staying the same. So our analysis would match what you see here. The only thing that's being added, I think, pickleball charge for pickleball use of the fields. Go ahead, something else.
And swimming, sorry.
Thank you. Alderman Gay?
Thank you.
Can I just get a little more clarification from the city manager? Is that
Okay. Awesome.
Right, the Michael Malinoff, city manager. The genesis of this is really to give the new director and us a chance to review fees. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to be coming back to you in the fall or late summer with some fee changes, but that was really what the idea was.
Thank you. Alderman Gay?
Yeah, thank you. So, and just for general understanding, we're striking all existing fees for baseball fields, and the proposed Okay,
No.
well, and then propose for city, for swim as well. And then we'll give the director a chance, based off of study and all of that, to update them.
So let me understand. I think that the fees are at a certain level, and they had, in the proposed resolution, there were some changes noted. We are taking the changes away back to the original amount. So we're just trying to delete the changes that were recommended.
And so is there maybe like grid for amendment number 2 and 3 where we can see the old and proposed?
So the baseball fields was a new fee added in '24. That was not the intention of that department. So we are removing baseball fields. So
Okay.
that's collision and, I'm sorry if I apologize if I'm not saying that right. And
Collison.
then, thank you. And Griscom. Thank you.
So that's what amendment 2 is doing.
It's just correcting it, right?
Correct, that's amendment number 2. Amendment number 3 is Alderman Savage's.
Okay. So I guess it just.
So is
depends
everyone
on
clear on that? Do you need any more? Alderman
I'm
Finlayson.
not clear because I'm looking at the sheet and there's a strike through as if it's eliminated.
That's right. So
Right.
I misspoke. It's a fee that they were going to add. Somebody from the staff said, here, we want to add these fees, and then we went and looked at them again, and the director said, no, wait.
Okay, so
She
all-
wanted time to analyze it. So the new things that were added were struck except for pickleballs and something
And
for
swimming.
swimming.
So for amendment number 2, the only thing, the new fee that was added in '24 was in regards to the baseball fields. There was other new fees added as well, but this amendment is only striking the baseball field fees.
Okay, I got that, thank you. So no fees for the baseball field.
No fee increase, right?
No fee at all.
Yeah.
It was new this year.
So no fee for the baseball field.
Let's get our director
How
up
many times do we
here.
have to say this?
Let's see what,
Good afternoon. For the record, Rosalind Johnson, Director of Recreation and Parks. As soon as I got here, the fees, some of the fee increases had been sent over to Budget and Finance already. Did not have the opportunity to look at them, so my request was to pull back all fee increases because I didn't know if they were higher, lower, where they should be, or what have you, nor did we know how many people had paid these fees and how they impacted other groups. So the request was to hold off. During that time, we also had the swim team who wanted to utilize the pool, and so we did not have rental rates for their utilization. So we did a study, we looked at other jurisdictions to see what they charge, and that's how we came up with the swim fees. Additionally, it was brought to our attention that pickleball had not gone to council for approval for the pickleball fees, so we kept those as requested and added what we're currently charging for pickleball fees. There was some mix-up in I think the code or the charges that were sent over. So we are correcting it so that we have the ability to be able to charge pickleball fees. We traditionally had not had that. There was something happened where it didn't get to council for approval. And then the swim team, we didn't have those fees because we didn't have anyone renting the pool prior to this upcoming season. So we added that so that they would be able to rent the pool.
Okay, so let me be clear. This sheet that I'm looking at with all the strike-throughs means that, and this one is baseball fields, Collison Field, there will be no charges for utilizing Collison Field.
There's supposed to be no increase in the fees for Collison Field, not no charges.
Because the strike-through would suggest that it's being eliminated completely, not just the fee. The whole title is eliminated.
Director Dickinson?
I think we're going to need to look
Yeah,
into
just give me a
this.
second to, sorry.
Yeah.
May I ask for a second to pull up the current fee schedule? My understanding is that it's a new,
I'm going to get to you, Alderman Savage, I'm going to get to you. So,
I can clarify, I can answer that issue with the fields and have it up.
on the field,
Okay.
or are you talking about the swim team?
We're talking about the fields right now. In the current fee schedule, there is something for field rental, which is $80 per 4-hour block. The proposed changes are to add specific fees for the baseball fields, for collision baseball and Griscom baseball fields, which would be the $160 and $180 for each 4-hour block. So the amendment number 2 would remove the new baseball field, so presumably it would default to the existing field rental rate, which is the $80 per 4-hour block or $95 per 4-hour block. That's as proposed in the whatever the resolution.
I think the reason that if you look at, because all the women, I had the same concern, because it was fully striped. When we see it like that, that means it's removing the program. But if you look at our amendment number 1 from Alderwoman O'Neill, how they have just the fee struck out and then they add the new fee with the underline, maybe if we change that one to that, it would help because as it reads, it's struck. So maybe just strike out 180 and just put 80.
If it's, okay, let's look into this and, go ahead.
So I have the current fees, or the proposed fee schedule up based on the resolution. And what the new ad for 24 is baseball fields, the 2 baseball fields, and we're striking those in their entirety, right? That will then default to the field rental to be the $80 for a 4-hour block.
Correct.
If we strike those. And that's the intention of the director.
That's what Alderman Savage just said. It would default back to what it is now, a charge per just general field use and not specific fields.
So are we delineating the specificity for those 2 fields and just fields in general? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, voting
Okay.
that down, yeah. Right? So for the public, there'll be no increase on the fields, just the standard rates that we are doing right now. That's
correct.
Thank you. And then clarification for Alderman Savage, on the pool, I thought you were just trying to quantify what the number is so that we can waive that fee, is that right?
Our understanding was that a fee waiver would be requested of the council. We had those fees because there could be other people who want to come and utilize the pool, and that is the fee that we are suggesting would be charged. But of course, the director doesn't have the ability to waive any fees. We have to charge the fees that are in the fee schedule, but council has the ability to waive those fees.
Yep, which is where we're heading. Alderman Savage, we're doing so well. Look how far we got.
That's not where we're headed, because we can't waive fees that are not on the books.
Right.
There are no pool fees currently, because there never had to be until the team became a nonprofit. However, we're now coming in at the 11th hour. So again, there are no fees that can be charged legally. There's nothing in this fee schedule. Even if this passes, this can't take effect until July 1st, which would mean the team would already be through half their season or whatever it is. That's why my proposal is to remove those fees as well as the baseball and the pickleball court fees, because there's a larger question we need to have, which is larger dialogue after Rec and Parks has a chance to do some more analysis, larger dialogue with the council about how we want to treat fees for recreational groups. If these nonprofits keep coming to us for fee waivers, that tells me the fees are probably too high to begin with. So I think we need to talk about that. Another option, which I think we need to talk about, is utilizing the community grant program, because I do agree with my colleague, like in a lot of these groups, Maryland All, Community Action Agency, they have huge budgets, and we give them really pennies relative to their overall budget, but the amount of money we give them could pay for a lot of these youth groups as far as the field fees. So we need to talk about that. We also need to talk about how currently in the code it does allow for, I need to ask the law office, but there currently is already a facility fee included in the code that lays out it's based directly on staff costs. And so that is something we need to look at as far as how we're charging our facilities. So that's why I'm trying to waive these fees, because what's currently proposed, just as an example, we know it's already very expensive. It would be very expensive for the All-Stars, but let me also explain, with these proposed pool fees, that would be $20,000 in fees that we're expecting the Penguins to pay for when they have not even, they've already concluded their registration to pay for their existing expenses. This is unplanned, so they can't do it. And again, we can't waive it because these fees are not even official until July 1st. So it makes everything more simple if we just waive these We've already set aside money in last year's budget, $3,000 to pay for the penguins. I think that can be used by Rec Parks to pay for the staff costs, and that'll carry us on forward. This amendment just kind of helps to buy us some time, frankly.
Any questions on that amendment? Mr. City Manager, for clarification.
Yes, the only clarification I'd give is I agree with the conversation that I had with Alderman Savage, that it would give us a pause to look at the fee structure going forward. There are other issues related to that on who you waive fees for and under what standards. Are they nonprofits? Are they not? And it seems to be becoming a recurring issue. And another was to give the new director an opportunity. She had mentioned a new fee structure for, I think, nonprofits and others in Anne Arundel County that we may want to take a look at, so it's in concert with what we have. So I don't disagree. I think it's a lot of confusion here, and if it is a new fee for a group that's starting before the fiscal year, we can't charge them. So it does make sense.
Director.
I would also share too that getting rid or eliminating the fee will open the floodgates and will cause a larger challenge for us here in the city of Annapolis, because you remove a barrier that Anne Arundel County currently has, where people have to pay fees in order to utilize the fields. And so there is a delineation as well between nonprofits for children and nonprofits for adults. There's a philosophy that adults should pay to utilize the field, and children or youth shouldn't have to pay to utilize the field. And then you get into AAU, you get into club, and you get into pushing out the general kind of recreation program. So this is part of a larger issue and a larger challenge. I would be concerned to see Anne Arundel County's field users, traditional field users, coming to the city of Annapolis to utilize our fields where they've traditionally gone to Anne Arundel County to utilize their fields. Because based on our permit policy, now, first of all, the department has first access to the fields, then nonprofits have second access, then for-profits are after that. So that would allow, and it's first come, first serve. So once we open it, and let's say Anne Arundel soccer team or whatever that group is that happens to be a nonprofit beats, let's say the Annapolis All-Stars or Tim DeWitt's group, who's a nonprofit, to getting a permit request in, then they would have use of the fields for free. And so once people learn that our fields are free and they don't have to permit them or pay for them, then it's going to enter a different challenge for us here in the city.
Thank you. Alderman Gay?
Thank you. Really quickly. So will you have prepared the new fee schedule for recreation and parks, including your commit schedule with the nonprofits, et cetera, so that we can vote on the 5th?
It will take us some time to pull that information together. We have to look at historical data and historical information and who traditionally utilizes our fields. So that will take us some time. The 5th is week after next. I would say no, that would be a challenge for us.
So, and just also quickly, really quick, I'm sorry. If what Alderman Savage said is correct, we can't charge right now we shouldn't be charging for city passes, for seasonal passes, because it is not in the...
Seasonal passes are in the fee structure. The only thing that's not in the fee structure is renting out the whole pool, for example, for a swim meet, and renting a lane or multiple lanes.
And do you do, when you rent out to like a nonprofit or whatever, is it like for like a party, birthday, or...
So birthday parties are separate. Are you talking about at the pool?
Yeah. So full pool, just quickly on that.
So full pool, the full pool is for a swim meet.
Oh, okay.
And that would be outside of our operating hours.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And City Manager had some clarification too, I think.
No, and we're good. I would say first, Michael Malinoff, City Manager, that Director Dickinson and I discussed that we can make amendments later than June 5th. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in time for the adoption of this budget. It can be later on in the summer to give them an opportunity to come back with recommendations.
Okay, thank you so much, Director. Thank you. Director Dickinson?
We have 2 amendments proposed by Alderwoman O'Neill regarding fines.
Yes, so the first one is places where stopping is prohibited. I was asked by the Transportation Department to increase that from 50 to 100. It's a safety issue. And amendment number 2 was non-residential parking permit violations. We've talked, if you look through the current fine schedule, the first offense is 50 and the second offense is 50. And we were looking for a little bit of a deterrent from somebody to keep going. In most other areas, a second offense or additional offenses after the first are an increased fine. It is if you're parking, if you've gone over your meter, the first one is 40 and then it goes up incrementally. So we were just asking for an increase.
Thank you. Anything else, Director Dickinson? Nope.
Not from me. Katie, can you think of anything else we need to talk about right now?
No, ma'am.
Just remember to share information amongst yourselves. If you have questions about some of these amendments or want more information, so that we're prepared for the 5th and we're not asking more questions than necessary. I'm sorry. Say it.
And also, if you have any general questions for clarification from staff, please email the finance director and she'll give it to me and we'll follow it up so that we can provide you ample information.
Thank you. I'm going to go around the room. Alderman Pendle Charles, Alderman Gay, Alderman Tierney.
Only thing I want to say is this has been extremely worthwhile and helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Alderman Gay.
Echoing that, this was fantastic and the fastest one probably. But I had a quick question about number 4 because I missed it. So by adding the monies from the police department, that's $44,300 for the Hispanic Outreach Navigator, are we duplicating efforts? Because if I'm not mistaken, Laura is still technically the Hispanic liaison. And so what's the difference between the Hispanic liaison and the Hispanic?
It's an existing position that we already have filled within her division. What happened was the grant funding that we anticipated to have on July 1st to keep it going, we were told that it wasn't going to be funded until possibly later in the year.
So then my second question is, and I'm sure maybe you're changing her title, whatever. Currently, we have two Hispanic liaisons or outreach coordinators, or so is Laura not the Hispanic liaison?
This is not Laura's position. This is another position that is.
I'm aware that it was with the CARES program. I'm aware of that, but my question is, right now by title, Laura still has the Hispanic liaison title, no? She said right here during the budget that she was still the Hispanic liaison. And so I'm wondering, do we have a Hispanic liaison, a Hispanic outreach coordinator, and only one African-American liaison?
Okay, that's not.
I'll get Kate to come up and give some clarification. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Kate Pettit, Chief of Staff to Mayor Buckley. The Hispanic liaison role has technically moved with Laura. It's still technically the role lives within the Mayor's office, but it hasn't been backfilled, and Laura's continued to do the work from OCS. That is different work to what the Hispanic Outreach Navigator is doing. That position is focused on direct service to services to the Hispanic community in a similar way that our new community service engagement officer, Ron Shea, is going to be working in the African American community. So these are OCS service positions that are focused on the needs of specific communities.
So I'm assuming that when the HR department does the position stuff and reclassification, will titles be included in that? Just because, again, for me, is if I see Hispanic liaison and Hispanic outreach navigator, I'm assuming that there's two, and then there's just one, you see?
The liaison duties are very different to the Hispanic Outreach Navigator. One is focused on service delivery as part of the OCS program. The Hispanic liaison functions typically are much more focused on community events and community outreach, like the Taco Fest, like Day of the Dead. The Mayor's Office still support Laura to deliver all that, so we actually share all of the work in around the event planning and administration for those. Laura takes the lead on developing those liaison events. So she does that from her new role as well.
I think I mentioned, I appreciate you very much, Kate, you know that. I think I mentioned previously, I do have legitimate concern about the way it's structured right now, because the African-American liaison is very vulnerable, being in the mayor's office as opposed to being OCS, where all of the Hispanic, whether it be liaison, which is a different role than outreach, I understand, and they do different functions. Nonetheless, they're in the same office, while the African-American liaison is just simply working out of the mayor's office.
So I think, for the mayor's office typically has had liaison role, and we still see that as our role, and believe that that's kind of one of the primary duties of our office, is to be liaison and provide specific services and outreach to all our communities. The decision for the position not to be backfilled was made last year as part of the budget deliberations, and we do actually work very much as one team. So we meet regularly with OCS, we work together with our community program and with our liaison programming. So we're sharing all of the resources across the team, and I think there's a longer term question around that liaison function and where that lives, but the current arrangement is working, and we are working across teams on those. The African American liaison position does all of the ceremonial and community outreach events, but also delivers service programming as well, as you know. So there's some cross functions there, but everybody's working together, and we are able to deliver the services working together across the teams and supporting each other.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Tierney?
Yeah, you're going to shoot me for asking this question, but blame it on shingles here. If you go to amendment number 5, Director Dickinson, the complicated one where it's assuming that we're not going to get the opioid grant from the state. So if we get the grant, are those respective positions reinstated, or is that money, for example, we are using 30,000 of the PIO position. We're again, some of them are not applicable, as you said before, but instead of the money just going right into general fund, or those?
So that amendment moves some of the money, the budget money around, takes some from a certain position, certain sources, and creates 113,000 to go to the OIT program. If that's not needed, that will sit in that line in the budget, and the council could say, through a fund transfer, move it back to where you want it to go. So if we did get the grant, we could take that. In fact, we did this last year, and we utilized some of the unneeded money for another program to help fund it. So we can do that, but it'll be a fund transfer for you.
And my last question, I saw it only happen, I think, once, was if there's any duplication. The one I saw was, for example, both Alderman Gay and I had to take money away from London Town and bring it to Lighthouse. What's that? Oh, I know, my constituents are going to love me, but anyway.
So keep in mind that if an amendment passes, and then another amendment passes, the second amendment will overwrite the first one.
Oh.
So they'll be taken in turn. We had to work out a couple things last year, I know, to see where you finally, but it wasn't as complicated. Last year we didn't have 4 different council people doing amendments to moving different funds around, but a secondary amendment would overwrite the first one. Yeah. So we'll have to provide some kind of preliminary final list to make sure that everybody understands how we got there.
Okay. Thank you.
Alderman Finlayson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am looking for an amendment that spoke to the PIO position, moving it from a part-time to a full-time position. That was on the list. Well, but my amendment was to add a full-time, not a part-time.
When did you submit the amendment?
It was number one on my list.
When did you submit the amendment?
Thursday, somewhere around there when I met with the mayor and Mike on Monday, so they went out on Thursday. My whole list, it was number one.
After the 15th?
No. No, these
Did you
came in.
provide that list to finance?
We talked about it prior to, and yes, I did. It's the same list. I only had one list, and it's number one on the list. Remember, Reach was number 7 on the list, and we didn't get to that.
So did you get an electronic copy of that, or is it just a paper copy? No.
Michael Malinoff, City Manager. I had passed it on to the Finance Department in this copy with my notes. So it wasn't electronic, but it is the first item on Councilwoman's list.
And it was in the Google Drive. Even I couldn't find it after I put it in there, but, so.
All right, so we don't see it in the Google Drive, so it's on this list. We can talk about putting it on there. I don't know where the funding comes from. It'll have to be ARPA funding again, because it is a recurring cost. And the finance committee amendment has to be considered, which removes it. Then there's another one to put it back in part-time. And then it'll depend on where this falls in order to see what it does to the final. But you're interested in making it a full-time contractual position. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Alderman Savage.
Thank you.
I just want to throw an idea out there, but might help us to avoid some of this, is we have, according to the spreadsheet, about $500,000 of ARPA money that has not been allocated for fiscal year '24 yet. We could very easily take $50,000 or $100 and give more money to some of these groups, and we could even set aside some money for the recreational youth leagues to help pay for their activities. Then we won't have to worry about everybody trying to amend the
That's an
community
amendment.
grants like crazy.
Amendment deadline. So that would be an amendment. And according to your own schedule, the amendment deadline is passed. So, I'm just telling you that's where we're at right now.
But this is an effort to try to make our life easier.
I understand your idea. I understand your idea. It's just, I don't know what.
That's also not a hard stop.
I don't know what would have to happen legally to put another amendment forward, so that's.
Well, there's no hard limit on that. That's guidance for us.
Well,
There's nothing in the code prohibiting us from introducing an amendment. All it takes is a second from one of us, but we all agreed to, again, it's in an effort to try to make it easier for us.
Thank you. And I would urge everybody to not to get too Kevin McCarthy on you, but as we get to our debt limit, make sure you talk to one another, prioritize your amendments and say what's the most important to you, what's the least important to you. If you think you want to spend everything down, then that's up to this council, this body. It's your choice. We're all going to vote on these things. Please get to the directors, have the information before you come to council on Monday. We don't have to relitigate all these things again. We don't need to say the same things over and over again. So speak to the directors through the city manager and make sure the finance director knows your intentions. Talk to one another, and then we'll be able to get out of. Yeah, it should be easy. Or you won't be sleeping at home on Monday. You'll still be here. Okay. Is there anything else for good order? Alderman O'Neill.
I would just like to say that if anybody is not doing anything tomorrow between 11:30 and 12:30, I could use a couple of extra drivers because at least 3 of my drivers are involved in city activities that will be taking care of graduation for Food Fridays.
Okay. We don't need to take a vote on this. We're all ready to go. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.